traveling through another dimension. A dimension not only of sight and sound, but of mind. A journey into a wondrous land whose boundaries are that of imagination. That's the signpost up ahead. Your next stop, the Twilight Zone.
It's the Wilk Report. I'm Michael Wilk, coming to you from Cleveland, Ohio, reviewing the third episode of Jordan Peele's revival of the Twilight Zone. And for the third outing, I have to say I'm really impressed with what's going on here. I mean, this is a lot stronger as a story. Not sure why they didn't lead with this one from the get-go, because the writing is just really incredible here. And right up until about the 30-minute mark, where I initially thought the show should have ended the story, it continued on for another 15 minutes, which, you know, if this had been The Comedian or Nightmare at 30,000 Feet, I would have said, end it right here. And you would have a very good story that is, very watchable and entertaining, and, has a different message. But the writer, and I'm going to try and pronounce this correctly, Selwyn Seyfu Hines, had something more to say. And I have to say, I kind of like the way that he said it. So let's go ahead and, before we get to the spoiler-laden review, let's go ahead and unpack the Hollywood Reporter take on this. The Twilight Zone explores the horror of police brutality. The Dark Tale offers up an Easter egg-filled episode while delivering a timely parable about the threat of violence in the lives of African Americans. And, with the first two heavily satirical episodes out of the way, the Twilight Zone is showing no signs of stopping its quest to keep up the moral compass of Rod Serling's classic series. With Replay, which premiered April 11th, the series showcases its most serious episode yet, as a mother, Nina, played by Sanaa Lathan, attempts to take her young son Dorian, Damson Idris, to college, but is constantly pursued by a racist cop, Officer Lasky, played by Glenn Fleshler. And that there are some riffs on a couple of episodes here. There's a most unusual camera in which a bunch of crooks find a camera that allows them to briefly see into the future after they use it, to make money betting on horses. The camera eventually captures their own deaths and, kind of foretells their own grim future. Then there's another setup of a similar kind in 1963, a kind of stopwatch where a guy discovers a stopwatch that can literally pause time itself. And then there's also a callback, to a 1959 episode, Nick of Time, where the Busy Bee Diner is shown. And then there's a Mystic Seer machine that, in that episode, appears to tell the future, and also makes a brief appearance here. But other than that, the story involves a camera that actually, when you rewind it, it really rewinds everything. It's like there's a saying, life doesn't have a rewind button. Well, in this episode, yes, it does. And it really really shows you that it's not all it's cracked up to be. So the camcorder actually belongs to Nina's father, and Dorian, who's going to film school at an all-black college, where Nina's actually taking him there by car, and they stopped off at the Busy Bee Diner. So he's playing with Grandpa's camera. There's a scene where Nina really discovers for the first time, and let me go ahead and start the slideshow here. So yeah, we open up, and it shows playing with the camera. You've got the rewind button being hit for the first time, and oddly enough, it's a Super 8 camera. We can do without the Jar Jar Abrams references, people. He's not someone you want to emulate. Screw you. So yeah, we see the rewind button being hit. Jordan Peele makes his appearance, obviously, to give the narration. because Nina is actually trying to escape her past. Because she had this thing where, she came from a bad neighborhood. She got out. She raised her son outside of it. She's done well for herself. She's a lawyer. So they're on the road. Dorian's messing with the camera while he's driving, which is never a good idea. Nina's like, put the camera away and, slow down while you're driving. They get pulled over by Pig Boy Lasky. And this is a horrible shot, by the way. You never want to have an object in the background sticking out of someone's head. But we'll forgive that for now. So Lasky notices the camera, notices that it's turned on, demands that it be turned off, and it goes ahead and escalates the situation, because he's basically, one of these highway patrolmen who just loves abusing his power, because he's only got a single stripe, and he's a fat pig, so, he's got to get his jollies some way. And so in the scuffle, the rewind button gets hit once again. And they are back on the road. Nina is driving this time. I think Dorian's still driving. It's like, but she's having, shock from the two instances now where the rewind button has been hit and she's back where she started. Dorian has no reason to expect any foul play at this point. He just knows his mother's sick, and the police officer shows up. His first instinct is to ask for help, but Officer Dickhead decides, well, your car is too far over the curb, so you're going to need to move the car before I even begin to help. And when Dorian balks, Fat Boy pulls out his taser and threatens to use it. And instinct kicks in. Nina hits her rewind button once more. This is the third reset that we're going through. So you just know this is going to start happening, bad things, because every time she hits a rewind button, it takes place just a little bit further back in time. So, she's obviously unsettled. Fat Boy notices something wrong, and being a bigot who's looking for an excuse to wail on someone is suspicious. Well, Nina decides they're going to take an alternate route this time. They're going to avoid that stretch of road where they ran into the cop. So they're at a motel. They're watching the lottery, and the discussion kind of turns to Dorian saying, something rather philosophical about how... And let me pause the slideshow right here, because there's a bit of a philosophical discussion on the nature of time, and things happen because they're meant to, because like from the moment the Big Bang came, all the atoms and molecules and matter that spun out from that go out because they're the way they do, because they're supposed to. And so Nina goes ahead and decides, well, look, I've got a rewind button that lets me revisit the past. Well, let me go ahead and abuse the game here. But she does it in a way that you don't initially think, because if I had the ability to hit the rewind button and start over again with knowledge of the future, you damn well better believe I'd be buying a winning lottery ticket. But no, she actually plays a game with her son. She says, I'll bet you that I can predict what lottery numbers are going to come up on the screen. And Dorian's all like, whoa, how'd you do that, Mom? But then, of course, the playfulness is interrupted by Officer Dickhead, who shows up out of the blue. No real reason, since, up to this point, he has no reason to suspect. Things get out of hand. He shoves Dorian into a picture on the wall. Glass breaks. He gets hurt. Nina hits the rewind button again. They're back in the diner. Well, Nina decides, well, okay, look, maybe if I kill him with kindness, he won't actually do anything. So she goes up to Officer Lasky, introduces herself, buys him a piece of pie, which he doesn't turn down because, he's obviously not physically fit for duty. And hey, if you're a traffic cop and you're on the road, yeah. So Dorian's like, what the hell's going on? And just when she thinks she's gotten his sympathy and, that's going to inspire Pig Boy to leave her alone, he decides, is that your Volvo out there? I need to see your proof of ownership. Yeah, your pink slip. And of course, there's a Busy Bee Diner sign in the background. Again, a hallmark to Nick of Time, which is pretty good. But things escalate once more, even worse. This time, Dorian gets shot, and it's the same area where he gets splattered with ketchup earlier on in the episode. Nina is horrified. At this point, because every time the rewind button gets hit and they're back where they started, trying to prevent this from happening, it replays, but only worse. So she's in the morgue, waiting to identify her son. She asks for the camera. She's praying for this next rewind to work, because it is her son. He's all she's got since she left her family behind. So they're back in the diner too before the cop even gets there, and they leave just as he's coming in, and of course that triggers his suspicion, which Dorian points out, after she's told him what's going on, let's try going back home, going to school by going back home, which is the route they haven't taken. And you think, this is where at the 30-minute mark that you could wrap up the episode, but no, there's more to tell. And so there's Uncle Neil, who is played by Steve Harris. He's kind of bitter that Nina skipped their father's funeral, and you can kind of understand why, because she lost two older brothers to violence on the street, and she says there's only two ways out of that neighborhood: getting shot and killed, or leaving and never looking back. She tells Neil about the camera. For some reason, he believes her. There's no reason for him to, but I don't know, maybe because she's family, but he decides he's going to help out. And then, of course, Pig Boy has tracked them down, which, again, this is kind of a cheat because at this point, how is he even going to find them? So they cut through old back alleys and even go underneath the old school building to go ahead and get to the college to drop Dorian off. They are stopped by Pig Boy, who has brought backup this time. Again, why he does this, we don't know. There's no logical reason to it, but for the purposes of the story and the point that it's trying to be told here for this scene that's coming up next, there's a reason why it's being done. So this is one of those things where you can kind of suspend disbelief and allow for this cheat, because otherwise it's not going to make all that much sense. So you see the officers got back up. They're ready for a confrontation, but this time, no rewind button being hit, okay? Because Pig Boy is like, this is how it's supposed to go. You know how it is. Do you not watch the news? But, everyone's pulling out phones to capture all this. Pig Boy is, kind of smug, but Nina decides, what? No, I'm not going to be afraid anymore. You are not going to hurt my son. You're going to let him go through. Because you know what? You don't fuck with the mama. Not when you're threatening her son. And so she turns the tables here. And this is actually pretty brilliant here. I like this. Because, yeah, Mama's pissed. You threaten her son. You threaten her brother. Yeah. So the other cops here, they're like, what the fuck have we walked into? And Officer Pig Boy here, he's like, gone is the smugness. Gone is the sense of control. Nobody's backing down here. They're done. They're not going to take it anymore. But no one's getting violent here. And finally, Pig Boy is forced to put away his gun and leave after everyone else has deserted him. Nina tells Dorian, go through that gate, go into the college. And, so he does, obviously. Very powerful scene here. It's just, so, very uplifting. And then we cut to 10 years later, and Dorian is with his own daughter now. And Nina's recording, as she has been apparently nonstop for the past 10 years. And she doesn't want to put the camera away. She's still kind of clinging to it. I get, maybe she doesn't want to miss a single moment, but her granddaughter drops the camera, accidentally breaks it. Nina's panicking because, this camera has had a huge impact on their lives. It's basically, helped her save her son's life and, give her another 10 years with him. But Dorian's like, look, Ma, it's okay. It's time to let it go. It's, again, very poignant and touching into the episode where it just really works. And, as an emotional impact, I mean, it just is awesome. So let's go ahead and check out Vulture.com's review, which the title pretty much says it all. If I Could Turn Back Time by Keith Phipps. Rod Serling didn't create the Twilight Zone purely out of a love for science fiction and fantasy. He created it partly out of frustration with the limitations placed on him when he tried to tell stories set in the real world. In 1957, Serling saw his script for Noon at Doomsday, a story inspired by the lynching of Emmett Till, get watered down by a worried sponsor until it ended up saying little about racism or the state of civil rights in the American South. But couch a similar story in fantasy, he figured, and you could get away with it. And so... yeah, I mean, and this is actually very in keeping with the original Twilight Zone. I mean, for people who want to whine about politics being inserted, no, they're whining about left-wing politics being inserted into TV shows and movies these days. And to the extent that they have a legitimate argument, when the political messaging is ham-handed, condescending, talks down to the audience, that's when you have a legitimate beef. But when you do political messaging right, as was done here in this episode, it's done really very well, and it actually assumes that, yes, the audience is smarter than you give it credit for, and Rod Serling understood that, because Rod Serling was a huge political activist in his private life, and, he hated racism and racists, he hated bigotry and hatred in all its forms, and especially an opponent of the Cold War, although he did, attack Fidel Castro for reasons I'm not entirely sure why. But maybe he just figured, I'm against authoritarian regimes anywhere, and I'm going to criticize it in my show. Well, I mean, everyone's got his opinion, and he's entitled to it. I don't know the exact circumstances. Maybe he didn't know everything about the Cuban Revolution, but he never shied away from telling politically charged stories, and there were a number of episodes of the Twilight Zone where, you end up getting preached to, but you're preached to in a way that, again, your intelligence is respected. And this actually is a kind of story that needs to be told today. You can complain all you want about it, but, there is a legitimate issue here that was kind of brought to the forefront by Colin Kaepernick, and, in spite of efforts to try and water it down by saying, all lives matter, not just black lives. Well, yeah, but if black lives mattered, then we wouldn't have to keep reminding you. Because, yes, this does keep happening. It's almost daily where we read in the paper or see on the news about an unarmed black person being shot to death or otherwise brutalized by cops. And you have to wonder, it's like, at what point do you stand up and say, look, there's a fine line between enforcing the law and just abusing the power that comes with that badge. And Rod Serling would have been all over this. So I think this episode, which is actually, so far the strongest of the three that we've seen under Jordan Peele, I don't know why he didn't lead the series with this. Because it seems to me that The Comedian and Nightmare at 30,000 Feet, these are pretty weak episodes, in my opinion. The running time was too long. There were, plot holes galore. It's not for lack of trying. It's pretty clear, between all the Easter eggs and the actual level of storytelling, and that there is actually genuine love and respect for the original Twilight Zone here. It's just that the execution leaves a lot to be desired. If the show fails in its storytelling, it's not for lack of trying. But it is still failing, at least with the first two episodes. But here, though, it really pays off. And it really is a sort of episode that you would hear from Rod Serling. And the messaging of it. And like I said, when you get to about the 30-minute mark, there's a legitimate argument, I think, for how you could have wrapped up the episode right there and told a very different moral to the story. But like I said, the writer Selwyn Seyfu Hines, I hope I pronounced that correctly. If I didn't, I apologize. But he had a message to bring, and this was how he did it. So yeah, I think that we finally have a winner here in Replay. You could kind of see where they need to get some more original storytelling and stop trying to just rehash other episodes, but it seems like Peele is got his team of writers taking what's been done before but retelling it in new and different ways. So in an age where endless reboots and retellings of stories that we've heard a dozen times before, is this the best that we can hope for? Well, personally, I don't think so, and I would like to see some more original storytelling. I also wish that they would tone it down with the swearing, because there's loads of F-bombs in the new Twilight Zone, other cuss words that just were not present, and for a reason, because the original Twilight Zone was written so that you could watch it with your kids, and you can't really do that when, first of all, it's behind a paywall, and second, when it's loaded with so many cuss words that it's like, no, I can't have my kid watch this. This is Twilight Zone for adults, but you need to be making Twilight Zone for all age groups, because children especially need to be hearing this stuff when they're impressionable, and if you can't show them the kinds of stories that need to be told on television because of all the adult content, specifically the swearing or nudity or whatever, or that I think kind of is a mistake. So I hope that Peele wises up a little bit here and tones down or eliminates the cussing, because this is I certainly hope that he continues with more storytelling like this, but you have to be able to make it so that the whole family can watch it, because the young especially, people who are inspired, people like me who were inspired by the original Twilight Zone, we were able to watch it on television and syndication precisely because it was made for families to watch. So but yeah, that's pretty much my review. Do you agree, disagree? Did you like the episode? Did you not like it? Why or why not? Let me know in the comments. I want to hear what you have to say. If you like what you've heard and you want to hear more, hit the subscribe button and the bell icon to receive notifications whenever we upload new content. And if you want to help support the channel, help us keep the lights on and bring you more content, head over to our Patreon or Subscribestar page. Your support is not only needed, it is also much appreciated. And, if we get to a level of support where we can actually do it, you can get things like t-shirts, mugs, posters, whatever, because we'll be able to afford it because you'll, with your generous support. So, we want to be able to do this for you, but we can't do it without you. So, anyway, until next time, this is Michael Wilk for The Wilk Report, saying take care, good night, I'm out.